Okay, just seeing, mashallah, who we've got here. Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahabatihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So Alhamdulillah, this is our third session and final session for this series. As our one of our ustads, he says that the scope of talk is vast and the time that we have is short. So there's no end that what we could discuss in this thing. By the way, is there any, while we're watching or we're waiting for people to kind of trickle in here, perhaps there might be any questions that we didn't address previously that you might like to, or some takeaways or something that stood out. For example, generally what we do is some takeaway from the last session, or perhaps, the two sessions, something that stood out, something that actually impacted you in such a way that perhaps we're going to see a change in, your lifestyle, or something that you can actually implement into your life. So we'd like to hear from people. Let's take, say, 5 minutes for that. I'm looking at the chat. You can, if somebody has something they want to say right online, that's fine. If you want to throw something into the chat, that's fine. But definitely we would like to hear something, some takeaways, so that we're reassured that people are actually learning some practical things. That's what the whole thing is. The whole concept of ilm in Islam is we learn things so that we can facilitate the life of ubudiyya for which we've been created for, to facilitate a life of worship, surrender, servitude, for which we've been created for. So that's the basis. We're not just gathering information for information's sake. Information, computers can store much more than us. So it's about what we can absorb. As they say, it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. So you might be eating a lot of things, but if your digestive system is not absorbing them and translating that into nutrients, which is going to fuel your body, it's you're just filling up your stomach without use. So similarly, we're filling up our brain with information. If that information is actually translating into action, that's going to benefit us in this world and the next. It's going to facilitate us towards a life of obedience, and that is what we call beneficial knowledge. So hopefully that's what we're learning here. So again, I would request anyone, even anything that they picked up, any small item. There's nothing small, by the way. Okay, I found it beneficial in the first session how we were reminded the Islamic stance on our bodies and how it's a vehicle for our souls, and it doesn't belong to us necessarily, and we have to take care of it. I hope, wow, that's great. And I hope that now you've started taking care of it. Is that the case? I hope so. And we're going to hear a little bit more details about how we might take better care of it today, inshallah. Working on it. Great. Work in progress. That's, I think all of us would say the same thing. Okay, any other takeaways? I'm sure you all have something to say. Shaikh, I really appreciate the reminder of the importance of hunger. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. We never hear about that. We hear about, eat this, eat that, like we're supposed to be eating all day long or something, So, but actually the default mode of the Muslim, and by any human being that's got a good sense of understanding, is hunger. Default mode is that most of the time you're not going to be eating, you're going to be in a garage. Okay, that's great. What else? Shaikh. This class has been great. I even got my parents to watch it as well. Okay, wonderful. In the past 3 weeks, I've definitely thought differently about food and have been trying to implement healthy eating habits as well as fitness based on what I've learned. Jazakumullah khairan for this great initiative. Well, Jazakumullah khair antum. May Allah bless you as well. And it's all a learning process. And I would invite you, this is really great that you got your your parents on board. So if you really want to learn something fast, the best way to do that is teach somebody. And in fact, if you're going to learn something with the intention to teach someone, then you're going to learn in a whole different, with a whole different dimension. And it's like you're learning twice, right? Okay, good. What else do we have? I have been intermittent fasting for the past 2 years and was very encouraged by your sayings regarding it. Okay, great. Wonderful. One thing that impacted me was fixing my intention to fuel myself for the sake of Allah and keeping myself healthy in order to be a better slave. It made me more mindful of what I put in my body and gave me new outlook on how I look at eating and drinking. Well, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Jazakumullah khair. Okay. Anything else? Okay, I think we can start then, inshallah. Okay, wonderful. What happened here? I hope I was. Let's see if I can get this. Okay. So I think we left off here. Maybe we want to just review a little bit. Let's go back a little bit and go back a few slides and just see. Sumu tasehu, fast and be healthy. Allahu Akbar. Hunger, absence of hunger causes most of deaths. Hunger increases vitality, energy, brain power, memory. Of course, hunger, which is, reasonable, moderate, you starve yourself. That's not the point. Freedom from pain, hundreds of illnesses, boost spiritual awareness closest to Allah. And as we mentioned, Ramadan is the testimony to that. Hunger renders food more delicious. Yeah. Be intelligent, adopt means of health before illness. Prevention is better than cure, yeah? Okay. We talked about this visceral fat, that's, this very critical thing, and particularly because probably a lot of our audience is from the Indian subcontinent. We mentioned that, various genetics, pose various types of challenges, and the genetics generally of the people of the subcontinent is such that they develop this visceral fat, which is around the abdomen, and it's not just around the abdomen outside, it actually connects with the vital organs and creates havoc. So one has to be very careful and try and keep that down. And if we look after our diet, well, we'll go through all of those things, as we finish this up. Diet, exercise, sleep patterns, managing stress, everything has, all of those elements have an impact on weight gain and weight loss, which is a big issue these days. Okay, now we're going to look at this. I think we read this ayat, but we're going to read it again, and we're going to look at it with a bit more detail. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا مما في الأرض حلالا طيبا ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. O mankind, Ya ayyuhan nas, I'm sorry, it should be Ya people who believe. Ya alladhina amanu, O people who believe, eat of that which is lawful and wholesome in the earth, and follow not the footsteps of the devil. He is your open enemy. Right? I think it should be ayyuhan nas. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we made a blunder there. So here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to two things. Eat what is halal and tayyib. And we touched on that, and today we want to look at that with more detail. What is the meaning of tayyib, halal, and tayyib? Halalan, tayyiban. So we have a few ayats and we have a few hadith. Okay. Let me just... Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الرسل كلوا من الطيبات وأعملوا صالحا يا أيها الرسل كلوا من الطيبات وأعملوا صالحا. All messengers, and of course the meaning here is the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, eat what is pure, halalan tayyiban, eat what is pure and if pure is mentioned singularly or halal is mentioned singularly, then it's kind of like when Islam and Iman is mentioned. When it's mentioned singularly, then it encompasses both. If it's mentioned, both of them mentioned together, then each one has its own significant dimension. Eat from the pure things. So they cannot be pure if they're not halal. So it's just like saying halalan tayyiban, but when it's mentioned tayyibat, good things, so obviously it's good, it's pure, it's wholesome, it's beneficial. And obviously if it's not halal, it's not going to be any of that. Okay? And so this is what the messengers, and we're going to see a hadith very soon that's going to mention that we have all been instructed as the messengers have been instructed as well to do the same. Again, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. O you who have believed, eat from the pure things which we have provided you. And again, the pure things, they have to be halal, they have to be beneficial, they have to be, and one thing to reflect upon, which would, prompt us for greater levels of gratitude, perhaps. Just think about this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created us just like the rest of the animals, like cows. They go out in the pasture and all day they graze on grass. And by the way, cows are supposed to eat grass, folks. They're not supposed to eat grain. So therefore, and if the cows don't eat grass and they eat grain, which is not what they're supposed to eat, then the dynamics of that is that they're going to be, as we say, you are what you eat eats. You're not only what you eat, but what you eat, what that eats, that's what it is also. So if your cow eats grain, which it's not supposed to, so it's not going to develop the meat, and it's not going to develop the balance of nutrients within the body of that animal the way it's supposed to. And your omega-3s and 6s, which are very critical now, they've always been, but now we understand it a bit more than perhaps earlier on. So the balance of omega-3 and 6 fatty acids are going to be natural and beneficial when they eat what they're supposed to eat, which is grass. When they eat grain, the omegas, the bad omegas are going to, elevate, and the not so good, and the good omegas are going to decrease. So there's supposed to be a balance of 6 and 3, which gets out of whack when the cows don't eat grass, you see. So anyway, so imagine that cows, they go out and they eat grass all day and they drink water, and they're fine with that, and they don't seek even, something more than that. They're content with that with their whole life. Now, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have created us like that. He could have, created us to eat grass or eat hay or wheat or whatever it is, and that's it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this, the special favor for human beings. We have all of these varieties. We have meats, we have fish, we have dairy products, we have vegetables that, just perhaps thousands of types of vegetables, on the earth. Fruits, again, we have herbs, we have, spices, we have, subhanallah, thousands upon thousands of varieties of things that are all tayyibat. So not only, should we eat the good things and, seek them out, but also reflect, subhanallah, how delicious and wonderful and good, that's the things that are good for you. They are absolutely delicious. And that's another meaning of tayyib, delicious. And natural things are very delicious, okay, so next, Ya ayyuhan nas kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba. Yeah, that's the ayat. Ya ayyuhan nas kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba. O mankind, eat from what is in the earth that is lawful and pure. So here we have both of them mentioned, halalan tayyiban. And so as we mentioned, if they're both mentioned, then there's going to be specific dimensions for each one, or specific, meanings for each one. So halal, obviously halal, not haram. It's slaughtered properly. The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, etc., which we'll talk about a little bit more as we move on. And then tayyiban, we've talked about that as well, beneficial, healthy, delicious, all that. فَكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ إِن كُنتُمْ بِآيَاتِهِ مُؤْمِنِينَ. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the halal, you know. So halal is not achieved by a stamp or a certification or a or so-and-so says so, or somebody claims so. There's specific modus operandi that renders an animal halal. And that is that the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be mentioned. فَكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. The name of Allah is mentioned. And who's going to mention it? A human being. And that human being should be a Muslim. Has to be a Muslim, as a matter of fact. So the person who has iman, he's going to mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he's going to slaughter that animal himself in a specific way, in which all of the veins are cut, and the esophagus is cut, and the blood is allowed to flow out totally, which has its own impact. Not only it's simply the order of Sharia, and obviously the order of Sharia is an order that is good for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need, our slaughtering. The slaughtering of the animals in the way in which it has been prescribed, that's good for us. All of that blood, in which all of the, the purification process, it's like the water circulating, through your engine. It's circulating, and all types of impurities are being collected and cooled, and there has to be a filtration system to take out those impurities and so the blood is flowing through the body, and it's being filtered through the liver. Kidneys are doing their job, and other filtration systems. So it is not only delivering nutrients, it's also absorbing toxins and then getting rid of them. So you've got all of these toxins flowing through the blood, and this blood needs to be released. So when this animal is not slaughtered properly, what's going to happen is all this blood, which is full of toxins and other detrimental elements, is going to remain in the body, and then you're going to be eating that. So it's going to be bad for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us ease. He doesn't want for us difficulty. And eating these kind of things is going to cause difficulties, right? So it's in our best interest, and that's why he's made it compulsory, because it's compulsory to look at. We mentioned it's compulsory to look after our health. It's compulsory to look after our bodies. They are amanat, they are trusts, and we are not permitted to knowingly destroy ourselves or knowingly cause detriment to ourselves unnecessarily. Okay. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ. And don't eat. So on the one hand, eat that which has been mentioned, the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been mentioned about it, and that which has not, don't eat it. Don't eat it. Right. So, something which has been sent along, and therefore, the question of animals which are slaughtered by hand as opposed to machines. Machines don't mention the name of Allah. And even if they did, they don't have iman, and so it's not going to count, right? So you need a human being who has iman in his heart, and he says Bismillah, and he cuts it in the proper way. This renders the animal halal. And then tayyib, we talked about that also. Okay, so which the animal which has not been slaughtered in this way, do not eat it. Okay, what about if you're in doubt? Very simple. One of our pious ancestors, he says, taqwa and wara is a very high form of taqwa, very high level of God consciousness and God fearing. It's what all the taqwa, embodies. So he says it's very easy. Just leave what is doubtful for what is not doubtful. Simple. So you're in doubt. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Okay, leave it. Now that doesn't mean that you go around issuing fatwas on things. One thing is a fatwa. This is the limit, and that is not to be issued except by a person who's qualified to do so. But it's doubtful. It might not. It might pass the criteria. It might not. So what do? We want to be careful. Leave it. It's not that we're going to die of hunger. We've got so many things we can eat. As a matter of fact. If we didn't eat meat for the rest of our lives, it wouldn't really hurt us that much, right? So somebody complains, well, what are we going to do? We didn't find halal meat anymore. Well, there's so many other things you can eat, You've got dairy products, you've got eggs, you've got fish. Fish don't require slaughtering at all. And so there's a lot of things that we can eat, even animal protein that doesn't need to be slaughtered. So you're not gonna, it's not gonna be the end of the world. And by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have now these products which are actually certified halal. And they've been well researched. And so we do have people who are cognizant of that, and we do have outlets where, these things are available. So we should avail of that. And I've probably mentioned, maybe I mentioned here or not, but, those of us who lived as Muslims here, say 40, 50 years ago, you didn't have a single, 50 years ago, I remember when there was not a single halal, shop in the country that we were aware of. The first fellow, there was a fellow by the name of Ismail Ghaibi. He was a Gujarati, Indian Gujarati American, but he's originally from Gujarat, India. And he started this shop in Brooklyn, and that was back in the 1970s. Before that, there was people who used to do it. They would slaughter it, there was a few people doing that, but it was very difficult to get. There was no shop. And then he started a shop, some other people started shops, and now we have all over the place. And as a matter of fact, we have major companies who, because they know there's a market, they know there's money to be made. So wherever there's money to be made, capitalism will be there to make it. So if Muslims want halal, okay, and they need a certification, okay, we'll do that so we can make money from them. So anyway, in Allah liyansura hadha deen bi rajulin fasiq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps this deen even by people who are not even Muslims. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. So we don't have any excuse, what I'm trying to point out here, So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, eat what the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been mentioned on, that is slaughtered properly. If it hasn't been slaughtered properly in terms of meat, then don't eat it, right? Just don't do it. It's not going to be good. The consequences are very dire, and we're going to see that. Okay. Let's look at hadith. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pure, and he accepts only that which is pure. And indeed, Allah has given those orders to the believers, which he has given to his messengers. And as we mentioned earlier, those ayats, Ya ayyuhar rusul kulu min at-tayyibat. O messenger, eat, in fact, messengers, eat of the pure foods and work righteousness. And it is also said, O you who have believed, eat from the pure things. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. So eat that which is pure and which we have provided for you. Then the Prophet ﷺ made mention of a man who undergoes a lengthy journey, probably for Umrah or for Hajj, for example, and he's disheveled and dusty, and he raises his hands toward the sky, calling, "Oh my Lord, oh my Lord." And if in fact he was undertaking that journey for Hajj or Umrah or for seeking knowledge, for whatever pious purpose, then you would imagine, and in fact, just being in journey itself renders the dua acceptable. Musafir, Musafir, Nabi Sallallahu a traveler, his dua is accepted. But here, it's not going to be accepted because there is a mania, there is a prohibitive element here. What is that? He cries, oh my Lord, oh my Lord. However, his food is haram, his drink is haram, his clothes are haram, and he has been nourished with haram. He's got haram flowing in his body. So how would his call be answered? Allah is pure. He accepts only what's pure. This body is impure with the haram flowing around in it and being nurtured by it. And the body is going to be affected by that at least for 40 days, because the natural cycle of regeneration of the body is in 40-day cycles, by the way. That's why they mention that for 40 days, dua is not going to be accepted. Subhanallah. This is a riwayat of Sahih Muslim. Another riwayat. Sa'd radiallahu anhu, he narrates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "O Sa'd, purify your food, and as a result, you will become one whose supplications are accepted." And Sa'd, he was known to be mustajab ad-dua. And there's very interesting stories about him, in this regard. And so people were very careful not to, to get on the wrong side of Sayyidina Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, because he was known to be mustajab ad-dua. And perhaps this was one of the key elements for that, acceptability of his prayers. because he took the advice of the Prophet ﷺ to heart and implemented it. As we mentioned, that's what knowledge is all about. So I swear by he in whose hands the soul of Muhammad lies, ﷺ. Verily the servant of Allah tosses a haram morsel into his stomach, due to which no deed is accepted from him for 40 days. This is from the Imam al-Tabrani, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala narrated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the body will not enter paradise which has been nourished with haram. Other narrations mention that the fire of hell is the place, right? Ka'ab ibn Ujra radiallahu anhu narrates, the Prophet ﷺ said, a body nourished with haram will not enter Jannah. So if it doesn't enter the Jannah, where does it go? Ma ba'd al-mawti min dar, imma Jannah wa imma nar. There is no place, there is no residence after death except one of two. Imma Jannah, either the paradise or either the fire of hell. Jabir radiallahu ta'ala narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, that flesh that will not enter paradise, which has grown from haram, and all that flesh which has grown from haram, the hellfire is more worthy of it. Awla biha. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, a time will come upon the people wherein a man will not bother what he intakes, whether it's halal source or haram. What do you think? Is it this very age that we live in? Well, I think it's manifestly so. And we find, subhanAllah, we hear all kinds of really strange statements, we're living in a country that is, it's not a Muslim country, so just say Bismillah and eat anything. I mean, it's really, really strange. It's very, very clear what are the perimeters of Islam and what does Sharia say about these things. And yet, have you seen the one who has taken his desires, his passions, his I think as his deity? Deity meaning what? That we surrender and submit, to that deity. And so many of us, our deity is our desires and passions, and as I say, we have a new religion called I think, I feel. The I thinkism and the I feelism, I think it's like this, I feel that this is, I have a feeling about this is, and so therefore it must be right. Nothing could be farther, from being unacceptable than our passions and our feelings, which are generally promoted by our nafs, which is, as we mentioned earlier, ammaratun bisu, generally, orders us with wrong and with disobedience, being the partner with Satan himself. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to, reflect on this and really capture the seriousness of this whole topic, and may He grant us tawfiq to act accordingly. I mean, here's a very interesting clip that I found Mufti Menk, and I hope it goes over properly. Wonderful things he says. So let's listen to this.
My beloved brothers and sisters, in order to do anything, you require energy. Where does that energy come from? One might say the energy comes from the food and drink, the nutrients that I partake of, what I consume. That is correct. Now, did you realize that your body and your system is energized to do good things when your consumption is of halal and pure food? And your body and your system is energized to do the wrong things when there is something wrong with what you consume. Now, that is extremely important. It puts into perspective a lot. We have a narration of the Prophet ﷺ wherein he speaks of a man who is raising his hands, crying to Allah, calling out for his needs. And the Prophet ﷺ says that what is said about this man is ملبسه حرام ومطعمه حرام ومشربه حرام فأنا يستجاب لذلك. His food is haram, his drink is haram, his dress is haram, everything is haram. غذي بالحرام. His entire system has been nourished by what is haram. How is this person's dua going to be answered? Now, If you look at the verses we recited tonight of Surah Al-An'am and Surah Al-A'raf thereafter, in Surah Al-An'am, Allah says very clearly, فَكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ إِن كُنتُم بِآيَاتِهِ مُؤْمِنِينَ. If you are true believers, eat from that which the name of Allah is mentioned upon. We as Muslims are not allowed to just kill an animal and begin to consume. You have to seek the permission of the giver of the life to have taken that life away for a purpose, and the means of taking the life away should be the most humane manner. May Allah grant us an understanding. More than that, we are supposed to be looking at how that animal was treated during its life, especially when we have nowadays the commercial growth of these particular birds or animals. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us success and an understanding.
Ameen.
My beloved.
So I hope that everybody could hear that. I'm assuming so. Can somebody just give a heads up that that was heard? I've never actually tried to play this on a Zoom meeting. So can somebody just tell me, did we hear that? Yeah, we heard it. Okay, that's great. Good. And that point, that you can't take a life, so this, hunting for sport, by the way, just, killing animals, this is totally haram. This is a life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given, and that point that he made, I think, was stellar. That you can't just take the life of a living thing without having a valid excuse or a valid reason to do so. Because it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala property. As we said about our own bodies, so the body of every living thing is also the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to take that life, we need permission, and then to take it. How? In the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. And then what he mentioned about the commercial production of animals as well. All these factors, and probably this is unprecedented today. This whole concept of industrialized farming, whether it's plants, whether it's animals. And this industrialized animal farming, even the fish farming, is horrific. Not only it's a punishment, and it's a torturing of those animals, but we're torturing ourselves in eating those animals, because those animals are extremely toxic and full of, really bad elements as a result of how they were farmed, what they were given to eat, how they were penned up and kept out of sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. It's terrible. Probably, if any of us get the opportunity to visit, just for the sake of ibra, to reflect, to visit any of these places, I think we would do well. And then I think if you visit a chicken farm, a commercial chicken farm, you would never eat commercial chicken again. And similarly, beef. If you see these cattle by the hundreds in this building with the concrete floor, in their feces up to their half of their their legs, their feces and urine, and they're going to live their whole life in this environment, and you would eat that meat. It's one visit to these kind of places, I think, would be a cure for that. So anyway, here is another very important ayat, and let's pay very close attention to this. And we have a commentary by Hafiz ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya radiyallahu anhu, and let's see what he has to say. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين. And eat and drink, but not be excessive. Do not commit israf. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like the musrifin, the people who commit excess. And the ulama say that excess here means excess in what is halal. Because we have two things. Excesses could be of two basic categories. One is called israf, one is called tabdhir. Israf is when you're extravagant in what is otherwise halal. Eat and drink, we're supposed to. In fact, as we mentioned earlier, we are ordered to eat and drink. It's the order of Allah, and that's why we eat and that's why we drink. And we eat and drink to fulfill that order and to fulfill our purpose. We don't, live to eat and drink, and so therefore we wouldn't want to be gluttons. We wouldn't want to be extravagant. We don't want to waste, particularly when this again, that's Allah's property. We're going to have to give account for it. And also, when we know that there are people who are in need of that which those excesses that we're wasting away. So we're going to be accountable on a double, from a dual standpoint. One is that we've wasted, and secondly is that we've squandered away what other people, should have been given. So the rights of others were there, just like we have the concept of within our wealth that Allah has given us, again, as custodians, there is a portion which is actually the rights of the poor. Within our money, the poor have rights. So therefore, when we give them, it's not like we're doing them a favor. When you give zakat, it's not like, you should recognize the favor that I've done to you. It's actually the other way around. He has actually done a favor to us, that he has, given us the opportunity to be able to fulfill that compulsory action. If we didn't have such individuals to receive it, we wouldn't be able to give it, right? So eat, drink, but don't commit israf. Okay, so israf is wasting, is extravagance in that which is otherwise halal. Then we have tabdhir, and that is wasting and extravagance and spending in that which is haram, which is, going on at huge proportions this day and age. And as for the people who are mubadhirin, this tabdhir, inna mubadhirina ikhwan shayateen, they are the brothers, they are the brethren of devils. And that's really serious. And where devils will end up, so will their brothers. So may Allah save us from that. Okay, so eat to live, not live to eat. Make your food fuel for amal salih. That's what the whole concept is. We're eating to be fueled. And as I mentioned, and while in the process, have that sense of gratitude that we're not just like drinking gasoline, right? Or just grazing out in the pasture for our fuel, but rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these amazing, delicious, along with being nutritious things in diversity, thousands of different types of things, the diversity of which, is mind-boggling. And so, but nevertheless, keeping in mind that what is the purpose is not simply to enjoy, and perhaps that may be one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made all that diversity, to see who's going to get carried away and lost, just to try this one, try this. Did you try this? In other words, see how does that taste? In other words, we eat for to experience that, that pleasure of taste. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that, but do we get carried away with that? Do we make that the whole objective, or do we make the objective making our food amal, making our food fuel for amal salih, and the taste and the deliciousness is the fringe benefit. It's secondary. Just like we said, we say in business, the whole concept of doing business is that we are going to engage in a system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala devised and He engineered. And in this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a rizq. At the same time, we're being tested as to how we're going to deal and transact with one another. That's actually the point of business. And in the process, we get our rizq, and in the process, we earn profit, but that's secondary, Okay. Now, here, so Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, this is very interesting. It's a little bit complex, but try and understand what he's saying. So he says, the heat of the body is continuously dissipating its moisture, necessitating a replacement of what has dissipated in order for the body to sustain. In other words, the body is, like Mufti Meng said, we're using up energy, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the source of energy, and actually He can give us energy from nothing, like He does the angels. But the system that he has devised, and that's the sunnah of Allah, is that He has created foodstuffs, and from those foodstuffs and the partaking of that, energy is produced. And so the body is using this energy, and it's built, by using these elements. And so when we use up a portion of this fuel, then we need to replenish that portion, okay? So the body is using, the solids, and it's also dissipating the moisture, the rutuba, as it's called in Arabic, in the body. And so replacement of those nutrients, of the solid matter, of the solid nutrients, and also of the moisture, which is also dissipates, it needs to be replenished. It needs to be replaced so that the cycle can continue. That replenishment is actuated through food and drink. Okay. However, when it exceeds the amount that is dissipated, the heat of the body is weakened in its ability to dissolve the wastes, which in turn transforms into a malicious substance, creating havoc and ruining the body. Okay. So what he's saying is, if the whole concept is we use energy, we utilize, the elements that have been created through the food and the drink. When we burn up that energy, when we burn up those elements, now we need to replenish them to keep the process going. If we eat and drink more than that, we're going to overburden the body. It's not going to be processed. It's not going to be digested properly. It's not going to be distributed and used and burned and utilized. It's going to be turned into fat. It's going to cause problems and difficulties and create toxins and create waste, right? And so he says, which turns in and transforms into malicious substance, detrimental subject, toxics, different types of wastes, which are going to create havoc and ruining the body. And much of the diseases that we get are the result of these things. They're not caused by pathogens. That's a specific type of disease, like viruses, and again, viruses, the culture of virus can thrive in a body which has a weak immune system. And one of the ways you can definitely weaken or destroy your immune system is to overburden it. So that's another problem that takes place. You just destroy your immune system. So you're building up these toxins and your immune system can't deal with it. It's too much. It's not being excreted. It's not being utilized. So it's developing all of these, detrimental elements in the body, leaving in its wake a plethora of diseases as diverse as the diversity of those substances. And so there we have it. Heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, this, that. So much of this is as a result of not, understanding and implementing this ayat. Eat, drink, but don't commit israf. Don't waste. By eating too much, too often, along with all the wrong things as well. Okay. So this is all inferred by the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu innahu la yuhibbul musrifin. Eat and drink and do not commit excess. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided his servants to replenish the body with food and drink to the extent of what has dissipated therefrom, to the extent that it is beneficial to the body in both quantity and quality. Okay. And so somebody will ask what, then we're going to read a hadith that's going to tell us the modus operandi for that. So when this exceeds these bounds, it becomes israf, extravagance, intemperance, waste, both the absence of food and drink or the excess. If you're not eating and drinking, to what is required for you, and everybody's different in that respect, then you're going to ultimately be weakened. And if you're going overboard, you're going to destroy yourself. You're going to have these problems that were just mentioned. So both the absence, if you're not going to eat and drink, then you're disobeying the order. And if you're going to eat and drink, but you're not obeying wala tusrifu, and you're going to enter into extravagance. So either way, both sides of the coin is going to be a problem. It's going to be a detriment to you. It's going to prohibit health and attract illness. So the entirety of the protection of health is contained in these two divine phrases. Kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. Eat and drink, but don't be extravagant. So in this one sentence, the very most basic element and fundamental, of healthy living, particularly when it comes to diet, is contained in this. So if we understand that and couple that with, kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba, so that's the whole formula. That's the basis of the whole agenda. Okay, now let's look at the hadith. Here's a very important hadith, which probably you've all heard, but understanding it might be a bit challenging. Okay. Mammal ibn Adam wi'a'an sharra min batnihi. That the Allahu Akbar. No man has filled a container worse than his stomach. Right? It doesn't mean putting any amount, but filling it up to its full. In other words, you can't fill up a container and you have such a negative result as filling the stomach. It's enough for a person that he has a few morsels that keeps his back upright. Okay, that just keeps you, standing straight, so keep you moving, right? Luqaymat, and luqma means a morsel. Luqaymat means small morsel. So number one, morsel, and then not even a big morsel, small morsels. So that's actually the default mode, is that a few morsels should be sufficient. Well, obviously we're not eating a few morsels, we're eating huge amounts 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. So we're just asking for trouble, as we should have understood from the last discourse of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. So what do we do? فإن كان لا محالة فثلث لطعامه وثلث للشراب وثلث لنفسه. So if there's no way out of, going beyond that limit, and probably for all of us, if not most of us, if not all of us, a few luqaymat is probably not going to, we're not going to suffice with that, like it or not. So Nabi Sallallahu, knowing human nature, people are not going to confine themselves to that, so they're going to eat a bit more. So to what extent? Okay, to this extent, that 1/3 of your stomach is in food, 1/3 in drink, and 1/3 for nafas. Nafas means breathing. In other words, there should be 1/3 left empty. Okay, so what does that mean? So do we need to have a kind of some sort of a gauge? Do we need to have some sort of apparatus, like we've got our smart watches or something that tells us when 1/3? And so that's probably, at least until now, I don't know of any technology that's going to, bring about that result. But so what the ulama have mentioned is that this is not, an exacting statement. In other words, there's no way that a human being would know that 1/3 of his stomach is, but it's, as we say, litaqrib, to sort of bring it into context. So this much is for certain. If we're going to keep on eating until we can't eat anymore, we have definitely gone beyond that, that threshold. So what one needs to do, therefore, the ulama say, and not only the ulama, holistic health people and people who are, more knowledgeable in terms of diet or recommendations, they would tell you that you should back off of the food while you're still feeling a desire for it, because that hormone which gives us the sense of fullness, it actually takes some time to kick in. So if we wait until we're full, then that took place maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. And the next 10, 15 minutes, we're going to continue to feel more and more bloated, more and more full, more and more lethargic, more and more lazy. So keeping that to a suitable moderation. And of course, and if we'll practice this and kind of feel our bodies will tell us, what is, after eating, we should still feel, as I mentioned, still have that desire, I could eat more, but I'm going to hold at this point. And as we kind of feel our bodies and feel ourselves, we can probably, come to a point where we understand that this is what my intake should be. We're not feeling weak, and in fatigue from not having, enough food. Because there's other reasons. There's a lot of other reasons why you might feel fatigue. But if we're not getting proper nourishment, whether it's quantity or quality, we definitely would. That's a very prominent reason for feeling fatigue. At the same time, if we're feeling lazy and lethargic after eating, then we have probably eaten too much. So we would want to not, we would want to be somewhere between that. So as we kind of feel our bodies and kind of with cognizance, we can probably start understanding, what that would be. And as I said, it's not one size fits all. Also, people have different metabolism. The rate in which they burn, the fuel in their bodies, and also the level of exertion, the level of physical, activity, and brain activity. Burns up a lot of calories. It requires a lot of energy. Your brain needs more energy than anything else for it to function. So there's a lot of various things. This is not the place to get into all of those nuts and bolts, but just to a basic tenet. And as we, proceed in the journey, we will come to know much more as we go along, and we'll acquire more, sort of specifics in that. Okay. So a few more basics that we should be observant of. That, of course, number one, as we mentioned, the foodstuffs are halal, and the sunnats that are connected with eating, and for that we'll find somehow this slide got corrupted and everything is 1111. But perhaps maybe that should be like that, because everything is as important as the next. Interestingly, that showed up like that. So Sharia is very important, Sunnah is very important, moderation that enables is also very important. So, of course, we're going to be very cognizant of halal, and we heard those hadith and those ayats, exhorting us to be particular about halal and warning us the consequences of consuming that which is not halal, and tayyib as well. We've heard about that also. And then there's many sunnats, you see. It's not simply what is physically manifestly, apparent to us in terms of this is a good food, it's got lots of nutrients, it's got lots of fiber, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what about, does this food have barakah in it or not? Maybe it passes all the physical criteria, but it's bereft of barakah. It's not going to be of any use, And maybe you'll find people that they can't. And eating, by the way, we all know that, particularly in this day and age, eating healthy is expensive. It's very expensive, as a matter of fact. And, the very poor, they're hardly able to eat in the first place, and then to eat, really good stuff. But the good news is, the silver lining is that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places barakah, then subhanAllah, even the lesser in terms of all of those physical criteria could be much more, and could be extremely beneficial if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places his barakah in. So it's not simply following. Of course, we're going to do our best to look after those dimensions, and at the same time knowing that the physical, along with the physical, is the metaphysical properties of our sustenance. Does it have barakah? And observing the sunnah, and of course, observing the rules of Sharia and the etiquettes of Sunnah, how we eat, saying Bismillah before, Alhamdulillah after, eating with our right hands, eating with, not eating with our whole hands and eating with our fingers. By the way, eating with the fingers as opposed to the silverware, it's much more beneficial. It's not that you can't eat with silverware, but the point is, but it shouldn't be silver, by the way. They call it silverware, but it better not be silver or gold. We're not allowed to do that. One who uses this in the world, he won't have it in the hereafter. But using utensils, I should say, that's probably a better word to use. But also, interestingly, we have the habit of eating everyone with his own plate. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, radiallahu anhu, he says that three things put barakah in the food: saying Bismillah before it, Alhamdulillah on completing it, and many hands in the plate. The more hands in the plate, more barakah, Yadullah mal jama', the hand of Allah is with the collective. And that's something that, people think is unhygienic even now. It's a means of barakah, right? Eating which is near to you. And of course, when you're eating collectively from a big plate, which is, let's try and revive this sunnah. It's a wonderful sunnah, particularly with the family. The whole family is eating on this one plate. The family eats together, stays together, kind of thing. So that's something we can revive, inshallah ta'ala. And in so doing, we should eat, as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also mentions, ukul mimma yulik, ma yalik. which is close to you. Don't, go over to the other fellow's portion and take out this part and that part, but eat which is close to you, right? And then also eating together from one plate, we would also be, cognizant of other people's rights. So that's also, comes into that. Also, it would probably, since we're eating all together from the same plate, we would probably curtail our eating more than we would if we were just eating from our own individual plate. So it has a lot of benefits which we could perhaps perceive, and much probably which we would not be able to perceive. And then again, moderation, we talked about that, kulu washrabu wala tusrifu, moderation in our eating and drinking that enables us. So we don't eat too much and not too less, so that we can fulfill our obligations, both religious and social. Some people have very physically demanding jobs. They would need to eat more, perhaps. Sharpening of mind and faculties. And so if we don't eat enough, then they get dull. And if we eat too much, they'll also get dull, right? So above that, eating, going beyond that is, as we heard from the ayat, it's israf, and so it's makruh. It's disliked, both from the religious standpoint and both from science agrees with that. It's just a fact. And particularly while preparing the food, and this is why I might have mentioned, and if not, then I'll mention here, I personally don't like going to these restaurants, even if they're halal certified, I mean, not that that I'm passing some judgment on them, but personally, I don't enjoy going there. Number one, I don't like the environment. I don't like, every kind of people are there, and particularly if you're going there with, with your family, with ladies, and then everybody's out there. So it's not really a great environment. Number one. Number two, with what intention are the people cooking back in the kitchen? Are they cooking with dhikr? Are they reading the Quran? Do they have this love and affection for the people they're cooking for, and this ikhlas that's serving, serving Muslims and serving, our fellow man, and, hoping for Allah's pleasure for that? Well, this is what our ladies, traditionally, is going on in our kitchens. This is how our ladies had been traditionally, and hopefully they will remain like that, And it was also the we say umniya, Muslims used to love this. They used to look for these opportunities to invite the guests to their homes, because the guests coming to the home is a barakah. It's a source of blessing. And the ladies would they would take this opportunity to serve the guests, and knowing that that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And it joins the hearts, and it strengthens, the brotherhood of the Muslims, And there's much barakat, for not only for the people, for the host, but for the guests as well. There was a story of Imam Ahmad, he came to the house of his teacher, Imam Shaikh, and so it was observed that he really ate quite a lot. And if I was, hey, is that just to be done? Usually. So he mentioned, he said, I knew that this food was full of barakah. And obviously his teacher, Imam Shafi, and of course his ladies would have been, such pious women, and with dhikr and Quran, and, with their ikhlas, and all those qualities of the people who are preparing the food go into the food, by the way. It's not simply ingredients, that are physical, but what the metaphysical qualities that are transferred from the people who prepare and cook and serve and host. All of that is going to enter into the food and bring more barakah. This is food full of barakah. I'm certain of it. So I want to get as much as I possibly can. This is how our ancestors used to see things. And we fail to see much of this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. So dhikr in preparing the food and all that goes along with that statement. Okay, the few minutes that we've got left, I'll just give some generic, like, do's and don'ts, very generic things. And again, I'm not a licensed practitioner of any of these things. I've spent my life pretty much under the mentorship of my mother, who was a trained dietitian and nutritionist and natural, lifestyle person. So we inherited this, from our family traditions. But so I'm just going to mention to you generic things. Now, if you've got a specific problem, you've got a specific condition, so you need to actually go to specialists who are qualified. And I would suggest holistic practitioners who are, they're not simply sales reps for big pharma, but rather they are truly doctors in the true sense of the word. And a true doctor looks towards the causes of disease, rather than just treating the symptoms of disease, which is what modern medicine tends to excel in. But rather holistic medicine, which those who would perhaps, and now there was a time when that was very rare. Now it's becoming more prevalent. In fact, MDs now, we have many MDs who have gone on to, look into other more holistic disciplines, in Eastern disciplines, Chinese medicine, Indian medicine, our own hikmah, our own the medicine which was based in the Unani principles, but our Muslim doctors, atibba, and hukama, they really developed that system quite to a very advanced stage. And Ibn Sina, you could say, was one of the, sort of the epitome of all of that learning. And his textbook, Al-Qanun, it was the basic medical textbook in Europe. Because where did they learn, modern medicine? What the precursor to that was what the Europeans learned in Muslim Spain, because the universities of the world, the greatest universities of the civilized world at that time, were in Spain, Cordoba and Granada, and all of these sciences were taught, as they were also taught, in the East. But Europe, they basically would send the nobles would send their children to the universities of Spain, which welcomed Muslims and non-Muslims as well. Everyone was welcome there, Jews, Christians, whoever, whatever. You wanted to learn only about those things, and fine. And they would accommodate that. And that's what they used to do. They would learn these things, they would come back, and then they went on their own path. So if you have some, I would suggest that, and for anyone having a specific issue, don't just jump on the internet and Google it and find a YouTube tutorial, but find some specialist who is grounded in preferably in multiple disciplines and more holistic approach in these things, and is properly qualified and ratified by his colleagues. That's how we know. How do we know somebody's great? Find out the people. Let's find out from the industry. They know who's great in their industry. So doctors, know who's great, among their colleagues and their compatriots. So we're just going to go over some basic things, which probably most of you may all be aware of, and maybe some are not. So first of all, okay, what to eat. You are what you eat. You are what you eat eats, and those concepts that we talked about. So specifically, let's negate, and then we'll affirm, just like the kalima, la ilaha, no deity except Allah. Right? Takhliya qabla tahliya. We'll negate, we'll clean and beautify, and we'll cleanse before we beautify. So what should we avoid? Let's look at that first. So anything processed, packaged in cans, it's number one, it's processed, it's gone through processing, which is going to destroy most of the nutrients, if not all of it. And in the process also, they add generally other elements, chemicals, flavors, colors, preservatives, and a lot of other junk, and usually a lot of sugar and a high fructose corn syrup, and there's it's about 99% junk, detrimental junk, by the way, and then maybe 1% something useful. So as far as possible, if we can stay away from processed, packaged, canned stuff, cans are probably generally, some of the things in cans like beans. One of the things in cans that I use quite often is sardines. Is canned fish, particularly sardines, because they just put them in a can. They don't put anything else. They might put olive oil or whatever they put, and then they just put it in the can, and they're just kind of cooked right in the can. And even though the can, hopefully, it doesn't leach a lot, but in any case, but as far as if we can get fresh, that's much better. But particularly things in packages and boxes and all that kind of stuff, just give it a miss. Fresh food. This is how people used to eat. Ideally out of your garden into your pot. And when I was a child, that's what we used to do. In our family also, we always had our kitchen garden, and from that it would come out of the garden, and within minutes it was in the pot, and then it was in our stomach, and there's nothing like that being farmed and cultivated naturally, organically. Okay, refined starches, sugars, carbohydrates. Sugar, you don't want to have a lot of any kind of sugar, because a lot of increase of your blood sugar is going to be bad news, particularly in our society today where we're not very active. And so refined starches. So we have this concept, what we call refined carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, and complex carbohydrates. So for example, you take wheat or rice. Rice, for example, it has around the white part that generally we eat, which is known as white rice, processed rice. So around that, the original rice kernel, there's 7 layers of skin, along with what is known as the germ, like wheat. You've probably heard of wheat germ. So all grains has this germ, whether it's barley, rye, rice. And in that germ is where all of the fatty acids are, where you'll find your vitamin A and D and all of these good things. So what they do is they polish all of that off, and that goes to the animals, and the animals are doing great because they get. But even though the animals are not supposed to really be eating that, but I mean they're getting all that nutrient, and they get very fat and very. And we're left with this carbohydrate, this simple carbohydrate, which turns into glucose immediately, and so you get a sugar spike, and then you go up fast and you go down fast. And plus, they're easily converted into fat, and it's just bad news all around. And then, of course, the higher levels of sugar in the bloodstream cause all kinds of problems, ultimately diabetes, and which leads to all kinds of other things. So refined things. So what about? Well, we'll talk about what we do take. We'll talk about that in the next slide. So let's try and minimize, if not altogether, do away with all of this kind of stuff. Processed, packaged, canned food, refined starches, sugars, carbohydrates, white flour, white rice, white anything. All this pasta and all of that, now and again, okay, but people make it. It's like their staple on a daily basis. This is definitely going to be bad news. Okay, vegetable seed oils in cooking and frying particularly. Number one, most of the commercial oils, they're highly processed. They've also got preservatives. They also got other chemicals that they use in the process, and it's really not good, period. Even if it's organic and natural, cold-pressed vegetable oil, fine on salads, okay? Don't cook it, then it has vitamin A and D, it's got other good stuff. But when you cook vegetable oil, it's highly volatile. So it starts to break down chemically, and it becomes toxic. And the higher the heat and the longer the heat, the more toxic it becomes. It becomes carcinogenic, cancer forming. It's really bad. So you don't want to cook with vegetable oil. What do you want to cook with? We're gonna come to the next slide. Okay, fruits and vegetables sprayed with pesticides. I mean, if it's killing insects, it's not going to have an effect on you. It may not kill you, at least not immediately, but it's poison. So you don't want to eat poison, obviously. And some of these vegetables tend to be more toxic than others, and some of these pesticides have more impact and are more prevalent when it gets to the market than others. Therefore, you can look it up. The dirty dozen. There's certain things like cherries, like apples, like tomatoes, like cauliflower. At least in Pakistan, cauliflower, they put this stuff to the max. So you can look up which of these. Obviously, ideally, we want to eat all organics, but sometimes it's not financially feasible. In any case, as far as possible, fruits and vegetables that have been unorganically raised, they've been sprayed with pesticides, we want to give that a miss as far as possible. Okay, and some are worse than others, and as I said, you can look that up, and you'll find there's Dr. Andrew Weil, is an interesting guy, and he's an MD, and plus he's a holistic practitioner, very well grounded, very good stuff. His website, I think, is very beneficial. Dr. Andrew Weil, Weil. And he has a list of the 12, the dirty dozen they're called, So it probably there's more than that or less than that, depending on where you are. So find out which of those are worse than others. But if possible, give them all a miss. Okay, animal dairy products synthetically fed and hormone treated. And we talked about that already. You are what you eat eats. So what are your cows and what are your goats and sheep? What are they eating? How are they living? What's the environment that you want to find out that, And now here in America, they're almost every milk says not treated by hormone, whatever, that letter that they have for it. But nevertheless, how are they fed? How are they kept? Farmed river fish, so just like I said, if you ever went to a poultry farm, a commercial poultry farm, you'd probably never want to eat commercial chicken again. Similarly, if you went to one of these fish farms, the stench of these places it's kind of like the pig farms. Pig farm, you can smell it like miles away. So these fish farms is very similar. These fish, thousands and thousands of fish in this little pond. It's terrible. So you don't want to, you want to avoid that. A river fish, what's wrong with river fish? That's the natural. Well, the problem with river fish is that we polluted the rivers so badly and obviously they're living in that environment. So they absorb those toxins. That's why deep sea fish, we're going to see later, deep sea fish, the deeper than farther out to sea and the smaller the fish, the better it's going to be. So you want to, farmed and river fish, you want to kind of, avoid that as far as possible. Deep frying is really bad news. As I mentioned, you're just getting, you're absorbing all of this cooked and high and this, it's just, they absorb the oil like sponges, and then that oil has been, generally, it's been cooked in vegetable oil, and so it's toxic, and you've got this huge amounts of this toxic oil you're consuming. And even if it was not so toxic, if it was better quality oil like coconut or ghee or avocado oil or whatever it is, but you're going to get huge amounts of it. It's gone under huge heating, and so you want to avoid deep frying as far as possible. Okay, then what do we eat? So the opposite: natural, organic vegetables, fruits, legumes. Right? It's a little bit more. It can be twice or even 3 times more. So people say, oh, it's very expensive. Well, I would prefer to invest in my food than investing in hospital bills and doctor's fees and tests and so forth. And, help donate, to the cause of the pharmaceuticals. I don't think we need to do that. So invest in yourself rather than investing, in the treatment, thereafter. Invest in prevention rather than the cure. It's much better for your health. It's going to be much better for your life. And it's probably going to be much less expensive as well. Okay. Natural, organic animal, dairy, and poultry. So, and again, it's going to be more expensive, but again, with the concept that we're investing, in ourselves. Deep sea, smaller fish. And I just talked about that already. So, because even nearby the towns, all these toxins and all these pollution is going on in the ocean. So if you can get, fish that are found generally far out at sea, and smaller fish because they're lower on the food chain. Because as the larger the fish, the higher they're on the food chain. This fish eats that one, eats that one, eats that one, eats that one. So by the time the big fish like tuna, swordfish, and these heavy metals are now, quite, prevalent. And toxins even throughout the sea now, we just destroyed everything. So they're finding now in these bigger fish higher levels of, heavy metals, which is really, really dangerous, mercury and stuff like that. So we're better off to, look at smaller. That's why I like these sardines. And you have this thing called bristling sardine, the very small ones. And eat those sardines with the skin and the bone and everything, that's all full of nutrients, very, very healthy. Fermented organic vegetables and dairy, like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi. You've got a lot of probiotics, which are essential not only for digestion, but your gut health. And we don't have time today, but in your gut, much of your health throughout your body is determined through the health of your gut, meaning your intestines. You've got, thousands upon thousands of species of good bacteria. Not all bacteria is bad. You have a lot of good bacteria. And if you don't have that good bacteria, you're going to have a lot of problems. And so these probiotics, they develop that good bacteria in your intestines and in your biome, as we say. So yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, vinegar, these kind of things that are fermented. Of course, halal fermented, of course, right? So then whole grain, organic grains from traditional seeds. If you can find, for example, wheat, one of the problems people have wheat, they have gluten intolerance. And so one of the things is that we have hybrided and rehybrided upon, added to the problem, GMO, genetically modified. So we don't have the same wheat that our ancestors ate. But ostensibly, you can get the types of wheat that are more closer to those ancient grains. They're called ancient grains: einkorn, spelt, Khorasan. There's about 4 or 5 different ones that you can find in the market. I personally use einkorn if I'm baking something or making something out of wheat. You can find that. So you can find, or if you don't find those, then at least organic, whole grains. Oats, rice, barley, millet, corn, wheat, if you don't have a problem with wheat. Cooking oil. So what do we cook with? Natural ghee, clarified butter. And again, if that butter is organically raised by pasture-fed cattle, or traditionally we used to make ghee, especially in the Arab world, they used to make it from the fat, or the cream from the goat and the sheep milk, particularly the goats and and the sheep. So that was excellent. So that holds. These can sustain the heat. They don't become as affected. They don't break down with the high heat as the vegetable oils do, particularly ghee. Also coconut and also avocado oil are probably the best for cooking because they're least affected by heat and by high heat. After that, for cooking, olive oil. Olive oil, you would always want to try and eat olive oil without cooking at all, so you get all of the benefits of olive oil. It is a saturated fat, so it sustains heat better than the other vegetable oils, but nevertheless, you're going to lose some of the benefits. So always try and get a very good quality, and it's not easy to get good quality olive oil. You have to really look for it. I get an oil, but it's very expensive, but it's very good. It's from I probably mentioned it. It's the Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club. And so like this guy goes around the world and he harvests it from all organically, family raised, and then they press it, they package it, and they air freight it to you within 2 weeks after pressing. You get it in your house. So, but you pay for it, but it's the best olive oil I've seen after, getting it from the farm itself. We used to get olive oil from Jordan, Palestine, from our friends who would come right from, nothing like that at all in the world. But I think this is the next best thing. Anyway, Kirkland is pretty good. Kirkland in Costco is pretty good stuff. And there's other things. There's a California olive oil. You can look that up. It's a good brand. It's a little bit. It's kind of like, it's more expensive than most of the store brands, but it's not that bad. It's also quite good. I've used that. In fact, I have some on order right now. Coconut oil is wonderful, great stuff. Sesame oil, good. Organically cold pressed sesame oil is very good. Peanut oil is good. Real unprocessed palm oil is also good for cooking also, because it's a saturated fat. It's good for cooking. So those are some of the things. So general recommendation: deep sea fish, fermented organic vegetables. I think that's what we covered already here. So we've gone kind of past our time, but I wanted at least, we got a lot more that we can talk about. However, as I said, the 2 things I want to announce here. One thing is that, so we got a kind of a taste for this kind of things. And as I mentioned, you can keep track with my Facebook page or my YouTube channel, Shaikh Hashim Ahmad, and see where our actual physical workshops are going to be taking place from time to time, different places. I've got one this weekend, but it's a private sort of thing. you can follow that. Also keep in tune, because we do these programs also on this platform also from time to time. And last but not least, I'll be taking a group for Umrah also in the end of July. And so Muli Abdullah will inshallah share that flyer, and perhaps he can mention something about that. And so if you're interested in that, that would be a great opportunity. We're also going to be discussing things like this. We'll try and incorporate as far as possible this type of learning along in that journey, along with our Umrah activities, inshallah. So I'd love to have you on board for that as well. And looking forward for further mutual learning among ourselves, inshallah ta'ala. So if there is any questions or chats, let's see. Okay. In our workplace, a non-Muslim Indian restaurant has contract of food serving for lunch. Before me, all the Muslims were eating their meat foods because they had tikka masala and they thought it is halal Pakistanis. But I asked restaurant people and they explained to us. Usually we use non-meat food like vegetable foods. I have doubts this non-meat food is putting in the same dishes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's another problem with these restaurants. They say, well, this is all vegetable, this dish, and then yeah, but what about what are they cooking? How particular are they in cleaning their utensils? After, would there be remnants? So again, what is doubtful, leave it, and then you're going to be feeling comfortable. Leave what is doubtful for what is not doubtful. Okay. I have two questions. If machine slaughter is haram, why do some halal organizations certify machine slaughter as halal? Is corn oil unhealthy? Okay, so that is an opinion. Now, I've voiced my opinion. It's the opinion of most of our traditional scholars. There is also some people of knowledge who have their opinion is that this machine slaughtering process meets the criteria. We definitely don't agree with that. However, we respect the right for those who are qualified to give an opinion on that. So there is an opinion there. We consider it to be a mistake, but Allah knows best. So having said that, if somebody holds that opinion and follows that, then I would consider that person to be wrong, but he might be right. And he might, in any case, he thinks he's right, and he thinks he's following something substantial. So I wouldn't, get into an argument. I wouldn't, have bad thoughts about such people who would hold these opinions. But I am entitled to have my opinion, and I'm entitled to it. And particularly when the principle of leaving what is doubtful for what is not doubtful. So something which is hand slaughtered is definitely not doubtful. Something which is machine slaughtered is doubtful. So in best case scenario, it's doubtful, and so leaving it would be much more prudent, much more adept. So, however, I can't stress enough, don't get into arguments or think yourself better. We hand slaughtered, he's eating machine slaughtered, I'm better than him. Allah is going to decide on that, and differences in this ummah. This is not the first masala. There are many masala, and sometimes there's a very juxtapositioning, in this. So we don't get, we don't lose our sense of respect, for particularly for scholars who differ on various issues. This is naturally been going on since the time of Sahaba. So we respect that opinion, but we don't agree with it. End of the day, but we respect the opinion, and we respect the people that may follow that, even though we disagree. I hope that's clear. How would one get over a sugar addiction? Well, start eating good stuff, and that slowly will go away. I would also recommend that if people who are not active, they tend to have these kind of addictions more than people who are active. Active, they're exercising, they have active lifestyle. And so once you start eating good stuff, you're addicted. These addictions, you have addiction to sugar and salt. These are it's just like heroin. It stimulates the same areas in the brain. So once you start eating, it's going to be a little mujahada. And keep in mind, those who struggle in our way, we're going to guide them. So, put in a little struggle, put in a little effort. It's not like you're going to take a pill and, it's going to happen. There's no Panadol solution. There's no, Tylenol solution here. You're going to have to, break it off, so it's just like, you're addicted to heroin, you're addicted to drugs or whatever, opiates. So there's going to be a little bit of cold turkey involved, but you have to struggle with that. And, no pain, no gain, not always, but in this case, so a little bit of control. And then once you start developing a taste for good things, then inshallah, hopefully you'll lose the taste for those things. But again, you're going to have to put in your share of effort on that, inshallah ta'ala, and pray to Allah subhanahu for tawfiq. I have a comment previously sent, which I would love you to see, kindly requesting you for du'as. Comment previously sent about which I would love for you. May Allah subhanahu ta'ala, make all of our affairs easy. I'll have to look and see that. I don't recall what that's referring to here. In any case, I also wanted to ask whether you recommend staying away from vegetarian Hindu restaurants because some say they use urine in their holy water. I have no idea about that. But I tell you one thing, if you understood what I talked about when I said barakah, so how much barakah do you think is going to be in the food prepared by Hindus? With all due respect, and we respect people's rights to believe whatever they want, even though we know that they're wrong. But nevertheless, people who worship all kinds of deities and idols other than Allah, I would not really want to eat the food that they prepared, whatever it is, personally. Now, whether it's halal or haram, that's just, that's another story. But would you want to? Why do we need to do that? Do we really need to do that? I don't think so. So I personally would not like to go there. If it's but their urine in their holy water, that sounds pretty gross. I kind of doubt. But then again, I have no authority to say anything about that. Okay, today I heard someone say Chick-fil-A is okay. What is that? Chick-fil-A, because they are from strict Christians. I have no idea. What is Chick-fil-A? I don't think they follow the biblical ways of sacrifice, however, right? Again, I have no clue what is that. The first time I'm hearing it, so I don't have any idea. But I definitely would not, personally, even though, if technically, according to the Quran, yes, the food of the people of the book, and of course all the Mufassirin say the biha. So they used to slaughter because the same slaughtering method was, all the prophets did the same way. And they all said the name of Allah, and they all slaughtered in the same way. And so their followers did the same. But do they do that anymore? Are they really followers even? So I kind of doubt it. And even if so, still, why do I need to do that? Again, why do we need to expose ourselves to these questionable things, doubtful areas? We have plenty, we don't need to. So why would we, of course, the question of fatwa, I'm not going to get involved in that. You can take that and send the criterion, all of the nitty-gritties and details to the mufti and let him decide, they give a fatwa on it. But above and beyond fatwa, there's a thing called taqwa, there's a thing called wara. And so basically, as I mentioned, doubtful, leave it. You're going to live you're going to sleep well at night. Otherwise, you're always going to be worried, is it or wasn't it? Was it okay? Was it not? So, let's just, it's a restaurant. Oh, it's a restaurant. Well, I have no clue. As I told you, I have very little knowledge about restaurants because I don't usually go to them. Okay, so any other questions? Jazakumullah khair, ahsan jazak. Thank you for your presence and wisdom, Shaykhana. May Allah bless you and your presence. Give us afiyat and wisdom. Ameen, ameen, thumma ameen. Barakallahu feekum. So, Jazakumullah khair. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and it was great having along. It would have been greater if we could have been physically, with one another. But hopefully sometime in the future, that opportunity may present itself, and looking forward to meeting you all in person, inshallah, somewhere along the line. And again, keep in mind, keep looking for our programs coming up from time to time. We'd love to have you on board for our Umrah trip in July. So I'm assuming that Mufti Abdullah will somehow communicate that flyer and that contact information, and would love to see you there. So barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khair. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خيرا.
Wa iyyakum.